Is that you?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Uncivil Law, where we learn through the misfortunes of others. As always, if you're enjoying our legal education content, please remember to subscribe. It helps our channel grow. For today, we're doing our weekly live stream with my guests, Legal Bites. Say hi, Legal.
Yay. Hello.
And Nate the Lawyer. Say hi, Nate the Lawyer.
Hi, Nate the lawyer. What?
You got it, man.
Right.
Fantastic. Yes.
I was hoping you'd
And
say the whole thing.
yeah, and it's the three of us, and it's on my channel this week, wherein we will answer all the questions because of our renowned and collective brilliance.
There will be no questions afterwards.
There will be no questions because we will have answered them all, which will be a sad state of affairs, I'm sure. And I decided for this week's stream to have the completely and totally uncontroversial live stream. So we're going to discuss a series of completely uncontroversial topics. And I thought we could start with the uncontroversial topic of what is happening right now in Israel vis-a-vis the Palestine Authority. So here is how I understand the situation that has emerged in Israel. There is apparently a group of 4 homes, which I think impacts 6 families in East Jerusalem. And these families are being evicted. They're Arabs instead of Jews. And these families are being evicted for failure to pay rent, essentially, in so many words. So these houses have been in various stages of legal dispute for 50 years, apparently. So this is a very long real property dispute, apparently, which has ultimately emerged in they don't have the title, then they have to give recompense to the prior holder, and they're not doing that, so they're being evicted. Is basically the long and short of it. So this sounds like the mother of all Blackacre problems. You know, who owns these 4 houses in East Jerusalem? But apparently not these people, and they're being evicted. So what would be a fairly droll dispute over, ownership of land because it's Arabs being expelled from East Jerusalem has apparently turned into a revigoration of a war because we don't need much excuse. So that's how I understand the factual posture of where we are. And of course, Israel and Palestine have been trading jabs and missiles. Palestine Authority has been shooting rockets into Israel. Israel has been bombing the Palestine portion, Hamas portion of Israel. I think recently they tried to bomb some of the underground tunnels that some of their leadership hung out in. The U.S. so far has used its veto authority in the UN to block a resolution that would condemn Israel for this. So that is the situation on the ground. So we're going to solve the Israeli-Palestine conflict tonight. So Nate, what are your thoughts on this, and how shall we resolve it?
Well, I appreciate your recitation of the facts, but I think you've left out just a slight nuance.
Fair enough. More facts are fine.
And so, number one, there is no Palestinian state, right? There's no Palestinian state.
Not according to the U.S. at least, yes.
Yes, right. But even though they're recognized by the United Nations, but in East Jerusalem is not under, or technically is not under the authority of Israelis, of Israel. It's actually under the authority of this quasi-Palestinian state, which is recognized by the United Nations. So it's like you have an Israeli court evicting someone that they don't have jurisdiction to evict in East Jerusalem, as you just noted. So Israel, so it's just like the United States saying, well, you got to evict this person in Colombia, right? Or in North Korea, right? You're evicted from that person evicted in North Korea. So the arguments, the technical argument was just a pure jurisdictional argument. Does the Israeli court have jurisdiction in Palestine or in East Jerusalem? If you don't recognize Palestine, and supposedly no. So Israel, because they have the might, they said, well, guess what? We say it does, right? So we're going to send Israeli troops in and have them kick these people out, right? Why? Because we got it like that. Who's going to stop us? There's no Palestinian army, right? We're going in there. They went in there. They did the evictions under Israeli law and said it applied in East Jerusalem. So now that set off this wave of rocket attacks. Now, I think rocket attacks to response to this is a little extreme. I'm not even going to say a little extreme. That's pretty crazy, right? Like, oh, we got an eviction problem. Let's rocket attack us, right? It's like, all right. But in understanding, this is a battle for the jurisdiction of not only East Jerusalem, the Gaza Strip, and so-called Palestinian Authority over these particular areas. It seems like this conflict's going to go on forever because obviously Palestinians don't want to, they want more than Israelis can give, and the 1945. But I don't know if you guys understand the 1945 or the 1967 borders, where it's like where Israel just can't defend the way the borders are. So that's why. So there are so many different issues. But at the end of the day, my whole thoughts on just the conflict at all is that back in the Clinton administration, when Clinton was on his way out, remember after Monica Lewinsky, he was on the way out, he got Israel to say, we want to give you everything.
Yes.
He got Israel to say, give him everything. Give him this, give him that. Just take it, right? Because Clinton was like, yo, I want my legacy to be something. Just take it all, right? People were so upset at Israel wanting to give up everything. Israel said, deal. We'll take the deal.
It was like 97%.
Yeah,
it was 97% of what the Palestinians want. And the Palestinians turned it down. You're absolutely right. I'd forgotten about that. I forgot how much it pissed me off.
Yeah.
Because I forgot how much it pissed me off. Because you're absolutely right. The Israel offered Palestine essentially 97% of what they were asking for, and they still turned it down.
Because they were absolute. We want it all. We want 100%. And at that point, even Clinton had to say, like, there's really no way we can get a deal with these people. It was so bad for the prime minister of Israel. I think, did he lose the next election? I know it was like the papers were being brutal to him because they were saying that he went too far. So I'm going to say this. I understand both sides. If somebody comes to take my house and then takes part of my land and says I got to give them a piece of it forever, I'm still going to be upset at that. I'm saying rocket attacks. That's the answer. But I think this issue is just so complicated, and I think if Clinton, at the end of the Clinton administration, with Israel just saying, well, let's take it all, and they're saying no, then how do you get to, how do you resolve this, And for you people with COVID regulations, this actually started based on COVID regulations for Ramadan, because what happens is they were doing mass gatherings at Ramadan. Israel enforced that you can't have 6 feet apart, no mass gatherings because of the COVID, and then the young people rebelled against that particular issue. So, the COVID-19 restrictions do have a little bit to do with it. Even though we're right about the jurisdiction with the evictions, this actually started with the Ramadan and them saying that you can only, you can't have these mass gatherings for this religious holiday.
Alita, what you think?
COVID complicates everything. It seems like, it's just everything. Yeah.
Rocket attacks.
Yeah.
Rocket attacks cure the COVID, I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
Well, they take away the host, it sounds like, is more,
yes.
more than anything.
There's that.
But when you've got an eviction issue, rockets on the property, that is one way to resolve it if there's no property left. But,
that's true.
Obviously not the most ideal way. I mean, I don't know. I guess I'm less well versed on this issue, but what I do understand is that, these are obviously populations that have been there for a very long time. I know Israel as a state was only established after World War II, but these are populations that have been there for a very, very long time. And when we think about like human controversy, like let's just think like in the United States, just take it to something way less controversial like baseball. Boston Red Sox versus New York Yankees. You go far back enough, and you've got who did what first, and people hating each other. That's just baseball in the United States. You take that back to centuries and centuries and centuries, where you've got these people that have been living side by side, or across rivers or whatever for however much time. Obviously, it's going to be layers upon layers of controversy and cultural memories and all this kind of stuff that obviously, it's going to be complicated.
Yeah, for me, it's interesting just seeing drift on this issue, because I can see drift in to a more extreme position. When I was younger, Israel Palestine has been in the news forever, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And in high school, I did debate. I love debate, miss debate. But of course, it would
Wait,
come up.
Kurt, you like
Yeah,
debating?
I do love debating. It's
That's
true.
crazy.
I
Would
know.
never have guessed.
Yeah. So it came up, and I used to have a much more even-handed position between the sides. These days, I'm significantly much more pro-Israeli. So I'm not sure what that's due to, but I'm at this point in my life, I'm like, I believe in the Israeli state. I believe in their right. These Palestinian posers, not so much, particularly Hamas, because they're just basically a terrorist organization that seems to be funded by Iran, and that's not great either. So I'm much more on the pro-Israeli side. So the Israelis are responding to ongoing rocket attacks. The Palestinians and Hamas have a tendency to put their military assets near or in civilian assets, so that when Israel responds, they have a tendency of hitting civilian assets because they're right there commingled. And so then they can say, well, look at the horrible things you're doing to our civilians. And then Israel's over here like, it's because you put the missile battery right in the middle of the park. What do you want from us? We have a fundamental right to defend our country. If you go to international definitions of country, there's the three major things to be a country are: you have to have a border, you have to have a population, and you have to have the ability to control your territory. And so Israel's ability to control its territory, it's like a fundamental right of sovereignty and self-defense all rolled up into one.
But their issue isn't controlling their own territory. Their issue is controlling the Palestinian territory. Well, the Gaza Strip.
I don't think Israel recognizes the Palestinian state.
Oh, no, they don't.
Yeah, so they don't recognize the Palestinian state. We don't recognize the Palestinian state. So we get to ignore them completely in this equation.
Yeah.
Well, don't forget, the UN recognizes the Palestinian state. I don't know. I am pro. Just so everybody's clear, I am pro-Israel. I believe in the state of Israel. I believe they have a right to exist. I'm with you 100%, Kirk. But I don't believe they have a right to Palestinian land. I just don't. I think when it comes to the West Bank and when it comes to Jerusalem and when it comes to Palestinian land, they should recognize them and say that's yours. And they shouldn't be putting settlements on Palestinian land. Now, even if they recognize it or not, that's wrong. I just think that's wrong. And I think if Israel just wants, they've consumed a lot of, the land that's not theirs. I do understand. This is a proxy war, right? This is really a proxy war between the United States and the former Soviet Union, but now, Russia. And what I mean by that is that back in 45, when all this went down, the communists helped the Palestinians, right? We helped Israel. And then we had the 7-Day War. Remember that? And American tech kicked ass, right? American tech kicked ass. The Israelis are flying all American stuff right there, right? There's no AKs in the Israeli army. They're using American military grade stuff. That's what Israel's using.
I mean, also, to be fair, the Soviet Union hasn't been making weapons for how many decades now because they haven't actually existed.
Yeah, that's true. So, they're done.
Yeah.
But I'm saying, but that's the reason why we're so heavily pro-Israel. Israel's democracy. We helped settle Israel, and we've been backing Israel over since then. And there's a very interesting piece to this too, because I don't know if you guys remember the end. Well, this may be going too far back into world geo-world politics, but back after World War II, when it was Israel, Britain and France invaded the Suez Canal, and the United States were going to put sanctions against Britain, Israel, and France, and forced the Brits to abandon it because they had actually invaded, and it was like a huge embarrassment. But the United States at one point was actually not as pro-Israel as we are today. So that relationship, but I think that relationship changed obviously with the Soviet Union, the 7-Day War. But at the end of the day, I think what's right is right, and I think we all can agree. Israel should exist. Israel should have the right to exist, but they don't. I don't think they have the right to Gaza. I don't think they have the right to Palestinian lands. And if there was a clear separation, they should have taken a Clinton deal, which they did not. But where we're at today.
Palestinians. So yeah, the chat. There's at least one person in chat who thinks that we're dominating over you legal bites. So
I'll let you
get back in this.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, not at all. I'm actually I'm enjoying listening to you guys much more because I don't have as many, I guess, clarified thoughts on this issue. So, but other than the fact that it's super complicated. But I appreciate that for the comment. Thank you.
The fact that they turned down that deal, because I had forgotten until you mentioned it, and the fact that the Palestinians turned down that deal was insane. It was insane. You have to be absolutely crazy to turn that down.
Yeah,
but it's like we want everything or nothing. But that's kind of like, okay, well, if they're not going to be happy unless we give them everything, how about we give them nothing? So that's sort of my response these days. Yeah, it's like, well, if it's all or nothing, if that's the deal, all or nothing, how about nothing? So my view these days is much more, how about Israel goes back into the West Bank that they abandoned 15 years ago? How about they recapture those lands? How about they, take over the whole thing and end all the terrorists who are trying to make their lives.
But that's going to put us right back into war, though. That sends us right back. That's into World War III, because now you unite the Arab world.
And even on that thought, I'm just thinking of adverse possession. If they've relinquished that for however many years,
yeah, I don't know if there's an adverse possession element in this thing or not.
Well, I mean, if they willingly relinquish that,
well, in some U.S. states, I think it's 21 years, and I think they've only been out for 15. So hey, there you go.
All right. I mean, you got me there.
No, I'm just being very technical. I'm sorry.
Just to make fun.
But technicality is part of our profession, though, right?
Yeah, technicality.
Especially when it comes to something like adverse possession.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So it just seems that it's just another excuse to stir things up. It seems to me that Iran is a large factor in this equation, more so than the Russians. I think the Russians were more of a dominant factor in the past, but it seems more driven by Iran these days, because Iran wants to be a regional power, to be sure. So yeah, it's a total mess, and my solution is let's get on the Israeli side and let's end it. Go for the end solution. I don't know what that would really do if you really pushed it, how that would really change in the Middle East. Because what other states would get involved in that conflict? I don't know. It could be interesting.
I think that's World War III, bro. I think you're talking World War III. Everybody's going to get involved. That's the reason why they don't do it now.
World War III fight in the desert.
Yeah, that's essentially what's going to happen, because you'll have all the Arab states now come to the. Even though Palestine is not a state, you're going to have all of the Arab states come to their defense, right? Because they only accept Israel's because the U.S. is so big, right?
Yeah.
We go over there and we turn sand to glass if you fuck with us too much. No, it's just true though. Pardon my French, but no, it's true that's what we'll do. So they know that. So, but Israel can't overplay its hand. Israel can't overplay its hand.
Well, especially considering that the support in the United States seems a bit divided.
That's true too. It's getting worse for Israel. It's going to get worse. It's a very good point.
Yeah, especially, I mean, not just the general populace, but also among politicians. There's definitely a political divide that's been crystallizing over the last 10 years.
But it's actually it's such a good point, because it's actually starting to turn away from Israel. Because remember, even when now you had all that beef with Obama, right? And Obama was like, yo, you coming and not even coming to speak to me. So that was like a big beef. And now you got AOC, because back then it was hard to even criticize Israel. Now you got AOC calling them killers and murderers in an apartheid state on the Senate or on the House floor. So, Israel's got a problem.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move on from that controversial topic to another completely uncontroversial topic. How about abortion? So our friends at the U.S. Supreme Court have taken up the abortion law from Mississippi. This law basically bans abortion after 15 weeks, absent very narrow exceptions. And it is one of a series of bills. I don't know if series is exactly the right word. One of a group of bills that legislatures have been passing around this law. In fact, the one in Texas just went into effect today, as a matter of fact, just by coincidence. The so-called heartbeat bill just became law in Texas that bans abortions as early as 6 weeks. So, and other states have pushed this boundary at various places. So the Mississippi one was 15 weeks. Now, what was really interesting about this is it was relisted at the U.S. Supreme Court for discussion for 8 months. 8 months it was relisted and relisted and relisted and relisted. So I don't know what you can divine from that, except the Supreme Court wasn't really thrilled about taking it or not taking it. So eventually they decided, I guess, to take it. So I suppose the question at play really is fundamentally, is this constitutional? So I'll let my guess. I guess twofold actually. First, is it constitutional under the current law? And second, if not, do you think that the law is about to move? And if so, how? So let's start with legal bites, since I think I started with Nate last time.
Yeah. So this is a super complicated issue because the case law on this. So we have basically two main cases in abortion law under the Supreme Court that we look at, and obviously Roe v. Wade. That's the one that everyone talks about. But the one that's probably more important for in terms of the test is Planned Parenthood versus Casey. And in that test, they looked at whether or not you could have third term abortions, I believe, right? Remind me, guys, because it's been a while since I read the opinion.
Well, yeah, Roe versus Wade was essentially the trimester system.
Yes.
And then Casey versus Planned Parenthood went to viability.
Yes. Yeah. So basically what they said was before viability. So before the point at which a fetus or a baby, however you want to label it. I'm trying to be neutral here in my discussion, but however you want to label it, at the point at which it can survive outside of the womb, that's viability. So you've got before viability, it's fully the woman's right. After viability, the state has an interest in regulating the abortion. So not to say that all abortions not to say that all abortions are automatically illegal at viability or after viability, but that the state has increased interest in the life of the fetus or the child. So anyway, so therefore, they can have certain exceptions. Like, a lot of the laws before that point were, that they criminalized abortion for all cases except for, for the health of the mother. That was the law in Roe v. Wade that was being challenged. So anyway, so viability was the test. But the problem with that is the law is trying to make these divisions in the sand while technology and health technology in particular is changing over time. Mm-hmm. So the definition of what was viable at the time of Casey, back in 1992, I mean, medical health technology has really advanced since then. So, we've got plenty of babies that now can be born earlier and survive and live, grow into children and adults that live long and healthy lives. So the debate kind of becomes, with this advance in technology, does that also mean that we also have the responsibility to ensure that these are, lives that have a right to live? But on the other hand, you have women that are like, you don't necessarily know that you're pregnant until maybe 10 weeks sometimes, and then you might have a suspicion, and maybe, how long does it take to get to a doctor? How long do you have until you have it confirmed? And so that can be, it's obviously a very, very touchy issue on either side. So that's kind of the background as I've seen it. You guys,
I'll just make one point before I ask Nate for comment. I think it's not just that the technology has made viability move, but also we have a fundamental better understanding of the development process. True. of the child in the womb. We have much better technology to map and understand that process than we did. So
right.
Our understanding of the situation is significantly more informed in that respect. But Nate, what do you think about all this? What do you think about the probability that it's currently constitutional, and what do you think the probability is the law's about to move?
I don't know. It's one of those things where if I wanted to change Roe v. Wade, if I wanted to change the right, well, first, I want to say if Roe v. Wade is overturned, that doesn't mean abortion goes away. That just means each state gets to make the choice whether they're going to allow abortion or not. So it wouldn't be a blanket ban, because right now you have a constitutional right, and that constitutional right extends to everywhere the Constitution applies, which is all 50 states. But in the context of this, I think this may be the chip away. I think this may be that first case where, okay, we can allow 14, 15 weeks, something like that, because people, that median step to get to a full, why do we even have this 15-week rule anyway, right? That's kind of how they do it. That's kind of how they do it, because they know a big change right away, the public may not go with, right? And then you'd have this big backlash. You're already talking about adding 2 or 3 more people to the court. So I think at this particular point in time, this would be the perfect case where you can say, all right, an abortion ban after 15 weeks is reasonable under the current law. And then you can say, well, and the arguments that would be made are going to be the argument that you guys are making now. Viability is a moving target, right? Mm-hmm. And it can go, continue to go back. Matter of fact, they can grow people in test tubes now, right? You can literally have test tube babies out there. So, the question of viability now is a hard target to hit. So, maybe a hard number like 15, but then I can just see the next case we're saying, why the hell are you, why make it 15 weeks? And then all of a sudden, you guys make your own rules. So, I think the law as it is now, it's questionable, but on a 6-3 Christian conservative court, I think 15 weeks is good enough.
Yeah. So one of the things that is so so Roe v. Wade has been law since 1973, right? I mean, it's been there. So many people have been relying on that being the law, that being the world that we live in. So so in terms of overturning this law, the Supreme Court, even the conservative justices, they don't like doing it once the Supreme Court has made a certain decision. There has to be a good reason. It's called, stare decisis, right? This is, even Scalia was big on stare decisis. Amy Coney Barrett is a disciple of Scalia for all, to, I guess, one of the best ways to put it. And I know that, I remember that during her Senate hearings, for her confirmation hearings, I remember there was a senator that asked her whether she thought that Roe v. Wade was super precedent, which I had never heard. I don't know about you guys. I did not hear about that term in law school. I had never heard about that term.
No, it was a term that she seemed to have invented in a law review article.
Oh yeah. Okay. So I didn't know where that origin came. Oh, Nate, you're muted.
Yeah, no, I didn't hear about super precedent, but they called it something else. I just can't remember the name. But there were some like I forgot which one, like Marbury v. Madison is not being overturned, right? That's set in stone. Right. But I forgot the term they used.
Yeah. But but I remember that it was the question of whether or not it was super precedent, and she said she essentially, I guess, sort of revealed that she didn't think of it as super precedent. But I mean, I can understand why, because when we look at the Supreme Court analyzing our rights, we have a certain hierarchy, right? So First Amendment rights, generally speaking, going to be very much protected by the Supreme Court. Due process rights also, like the gun law that the Supreme Court just looked at, warrantless seizures for a gun in someone's home. It's different than, warrantless seizure for, someone's gun in a car. But, still, due process in the home, the Supreme Court really, really cares about it. But when it comes to the analysis on abortion, so the court basically found support under the due process clause of the 14th Amendment. And I remember they called it the penumbral rights, basically like this
Yeah,
that
that's
how
where the conservatives go crazy.
the 14th Amendment, it casts this shadow of rights, essentially. So it's like, it's not quite under, but it's kind of under the shadow that sort of surrounds it. So it kind of spreads around it. And I know that it's like, conservative jurists, they kind of lose their mind over this, because it's not like, something that you can really hang your hat on very, very solidly, I could say.
Hold on, are you talking about substantive due process?
Yes.
Yeah, but I don't know. I disagree with that.
The really hardcore conservatives don't believe in substantive due process. That's really hardcore.
I mean, for me, it's the Supreme Court has decided on that, and it's been law for a long time. So I'm fine with just rolling with it as far as I'm concerned. But I know that there are people that have a problem with that.
Oh yeah. No, well, so I just want to say, if just to explain to everybody in the chat what substantive due process is, the Bill of Rights would not apply to state governments without substantive due process. It's a legal fiction that allows the Supreme Court to say, because these rights are important to due process. Without these rights, if due process wouldn't exist, like the right to an attorney, the right to a trial, all that stuff. All that stuff is actually against the federal government, against state governments. And there was a famous case, where the Supreme Court said, the Bill of Rights don't apply to the states. So they passed the 14th Amendment, and there were some issues with that I'm not going to get into, because that's like take a whole nother thing. But essentially, substantive due process is the mechanism the court uses to enforce the Bill of Rights against the states.
Right. And
it's what they invented to unnuke the slaughterhouse cases, because they made a mistake and they didn't want to admit they made a mistake. So rather than unnuke it, they invented this entirely separate concept to do something that was already in the 14th Amendment that they wrote out of it, and then they came in from the other side. There was this great privileges or immunities clause that was sitting right there. The Supreme Court looked at it like, that doesn't mean anything to us. But
waterways.
All right,
yeah. So I mean, but that's how you can have your constitutional rights against a state, under Supreme Court federal law. So I understand that a case like Roe v. Wade is a little bit weaker in its legal argument than other cases that are, talking about First Amendment religion cases, First Amendment free speech cases, but it has been law for a very long time. So it'll be really interesting to see, what the court does with this, because they are conservative, but they also, the vast majority of them also believe very strongly in stare decisis. So it may be a chipping away, kind of like Casey was a chipping away at Roe v. Wade. But I don't know. I don't think it would gut it entirely.
What do you guys think about this? I have the test for Roe v. Wade. It's the two prongs test. First, the state's interest, but the most important is that it's called the undue burden standard, which I forgot. So
is that Roe? Or I thought that was
this is Casey. This is Planned Parenthood.
Yeah, Casey. Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah. I was like, you say.
So this is the undue burden standard. So that's how they essentially judge if the law is unconstitutional. So the three examples the court gave of an undue burden were the 24-hour waiting period, where you can't have there's not an undue burden to make somebody wait 24 hours and get state mandated information, to have minors get parental consent or court's permission, and to have the center report the abortions to the government. Those things were not undue burdens. And what the court found to be an undue burden was having women notify their husbands that they wanted to have an abortion. So under this law, and supposedly the Casey says the pre-viability, there's no undue burden. And there's no exceptions, substantial obstacle, and post viability the state can ban, but must always have an exception for the life and safety of the mother.
Right. So I was looking up some statistics on this issue just to see what the viability numbers are currently. So for babies born between 22 and 24 weeks, and this is coming from the New England Journal of Medicine. So babies born 22 to 24 weeks of gestation. In 2000, the survival rate was 30%. And in 2011, it was 36%. So I assume it's moved up since then. I don't know if it's another 6% leap, but it obviously moved up. And the record at the moment for the youngest preemie to survive is 21 weeks and 4 days, and that happened in 2014. And presumably, so the idea is, okay, if we're measuring viability, so here's the argument that I think makes sense under the current law. So Casey says viability. Now, what do we mean exactly by viability? And I think you can logically read it to mean any potential viability. And because when you're doing rational basis review, you can treat things categorically, then I think you can probably logically go down to the lowest term. So since 21 weeks and 3 days or 4 days is the current record, I think you could pretty easily justify a 20-week ban on that logic, because you're going to say, well, we want to make sure to capture any potential viability that is beating the record but still within a reasonable amount. So 20 weeks seems logical within the current framework. If you're going to go below 20 weeks, I don't really see that inside the current framework, because it doesn't seem that there's any technology that currently exists that would allow for a 15-week baby to survive outside the womb. And in the absence of that technology, then you're not crossing the viability line. So if you're going to uphold this ban, you're going to have to modify Casey. I don't see how you can do both at the same time. So you would be going to some different standard. And what would that be? Because you would have to, your only other thing that you could draw it against would be perhaps some arbitrary marker. So you say at 15 weeks of development, the baby forms blank. And that's the point of differentiation. But why that thing as opposed to some other thing, as opposed to some other thing, becomes the next logical question. And you can go earlier. I think the heartbeat develops, like 12 days or something, the first elements of the heartbeat? It's really early. So if you go on those kinds of standards. So it seems to me that the most likely outcome here is that they're going to strike down the Mississippi ban, but they're going to give some language that will suggest a ban of not much more than that. The 15 weeks goes too far because there's no potential viability. And if you went around any potential viability that could be established under medical science, it would be okay to basically give a wink and a nod to some of these other ones, which are not as extreme. So that seems the most logical direction, because anything else is going to have to be a fairly significant change in the law, it seems to me. It's not 12 days? Okay, well, maybe I made a mistake.
Well, I disagree, because I think they can say this law is good. I do think they can say this law is good and still hold road to be true, right? Because you can still have abortions in that state, still can't ban them below that point in time. They can say this law is good.
All right, fifth week of pregnancy, I was off by quite a lot. All right, my bad. Sorry.
Even though I disagree with this, but I do think I think there's an argument they can say 15 weeks, they can ban everything after 15 weeks. But I think then they still get into the problem of legislate. Are they now being legislatures
right?
The court.
And that's one thing that I remember having a problem with in reading Casey, was that it was so fact dependent. I mean, they were really pulling on a lot of science and a lot of facts, and that's usually not the role of the Supreme Court. I mean, the other time that I can think of when the Supreme Court was basically doing their own review on facts was the very fun Red Rupping series of cases, where they were they were looking at at essentially porn to determine whether or not it was artistic, if it had artistic merit or not.
Yeah, a little movie theater in the Supreme Court and everything.
I know it when I see it. I know it when I see it.
Exactly. And I remember my constitutional law professor was talking about how one of them was like going blind, and so he made one of his clerks watch and describe to him in detail what was going on, like just standing next to him. I can't even imagine how difficult that must have been. But anyway, that's considered anti-canon now. When we talk about the Supreme Court cases. There's canon and then there's anti-canon. That's kind of considered part of like the anti-canon that nobody really likes to talk about anymore, except for, I guess, me. Weird. Okay. Anyway, we're going to move on from that. But
hey, I'll talk anti-canon with you. We can do it. It's fine.
but anyway, it's anytime the Supreme Court starts to get into sort of a factual argument, like, these are scientific studies. This is what science is saying now. This is what medicine is saying now. I start to get a little bit worried about how appellate courts are going to be able to take that, how, district courts are going to be able to take that, because it's the Supreme Court is supposed to be able to just give one basic, clear standard that everyone else can run with. And the more they get into sort of factual analysis in order to reach those conclusions, the muddier it gets.
Yeah, I think that's right. The Casey standard, when they said viability, they had to realize it was going to run into itself eventually, because viability is a moving target. It's not like that's going to be a surprise when they're deciding that case. So viability gets younger and younger, and then you start asking questions like, well, what if you develop artificial wombs, and now what do you do? And trying to develop that, because now you don't even have to worry about threats of health to the mother and other complications like that. So the technology causes it eventually to run into itself. So it doesn't really feel like it has a firm constitutional foundation in there.
Well,
which is part of the criticism.
Let's think about why. All right. I think this conversation is a deeper conversation than just Casey. Because if we're looking at Casey and the undue burden statement and viability alone,
I can bash Griswold too while we're at it.
No, but I'm saying I don't think we understand. It's like, don't forget, Casey was an improvement from Roe. Roe was the trimester standard. So for everybody to understand, for Roe, it was if a woman in the first trimester, the state couldn't have any restrictions on abortions. Second trimester was like for the woman's health, and in the third trimester, it was for potential life. Right? It was like they called it the trimester system.
Yeah,
and they rejected that because they said that was too rigid. That was legislation. That was essentially legislation, right? Where it was just like, this is how you do it. They're like, hold on, you're not supposed to do that. So then they went back and was like, all right, we need a standard where people can apply facts to law. So that's some kind of viability. And now viability is running up against that same problem too, right? Because it's just too now, it's such a moving target. So now we all know the problem. But what's the solution? Because remember, Roe was changed from the trimester framework because that didn't work. Now we're at viability. What is the next logical step? It's either, because eventually you're going to run to meet the road, right? It's going to be either they're all going to be legal all the way up to a certain point, or they're just not all going to be legal.
I mean, you used to tell me this. You used to tell me this story all the time, Nate, and so you can tell the story to everyone about, because Nate, you used to be a law professor, and one of the things you said that you used to ask your law students is, do you believe in the right to abortion? Great. Here's the Constitution. Find it for me.
Show me where it's at. Yeah.
Find it for me. And it's like, yeah, you have to work pretty hard to find it. It as I said in my video that I did on Roe, it's basically almost like a fourth order derivative. So first of all, you have to say that there's essentially a right to privacy. So you have to derive that out of the Constitution. Then you say, okay, that extends to the right to use contraception in the home between married people. And then you get the next derivative down of, okay, that extends to abortion. And then, of course, Casey is a
hold on.
Down.
You're shortchanging the list here. Like, the list is crazy.
You think I'm not being fair?
Judicial review itself is I
don't know. I see. I think it's there in Article 3. I don't think it's all right.
But I'm saying every scholar would tell you judicial review itself is a fiction of the court, right? So if we're just talking about the right to a fair trial, the right to marriage, the right to privacy, the right, like, there's a lot of rights that they've been announced. So if it's the fact that it's just not in there, that's like, half the rights we have are gone, right?
Yeah, so we're channeling some Justice Black over here, and the rest is history.
I'm like, no, I'm just being honest with you. Like you're throwing a lot of rights out with that.
Yeah, and then you can't exactly cherry pick either. So you've got to have
not really. You have to be
a good reason, right?
Yeah, you have to be willing to go to the wall,
Yeah.
and then you have to really, really stand by that principle. So
good luck
with that.
I think Scalia said it best. He said the job of the Supreme Court is to tell the people what they can't do, right? To say you can't do this. This goes too far. And he was saying that it's interesting that the people have made it so hard to overturn what they say. Because we trust them. We trust that they're reading it right. When the Supreme Court speaks, they speak. And I think at this particular point in time, it's a complicated issue that I think they want to try to split the baby, because that's what the court's job is. Try to split the baby.
But there's no way to split the phrase, baby. Man.
Hey, I grew up in a Christian home, so it's Solomon. But you're right.
Yes, we know that.
Solomon.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just the context is funny.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that was a fun and completely uncontroversial discussion. So let's see, what else did I have on my list? Oh, yes, the new great reality of COVID. So as we have learned from our masters at the CDC, now we can, if you're fully vaccinated, take off your masks, even if no matter what situation you're in.
Freedom.
Now it seems to me that there was no change in the science that allowed this opinion to exist. And it seems to me that this knowledge of the vaccines being successful and 95% successful and all the rest of it was pretty much known the day the vaccines came around. So I'll start the discussion this time. For me, this just goes into my continuing doubt and skepticism related to the CDC. I did a video on my channel a while back talking about how Fauci is a liar, to be quite honest. He said that he was a liar. He said how he lied about masks, and he just was on TV just this now. He was yesterday or the day before, he was on TV saying, well, he was wearing masks not because he thought he had to, but because he didn't want to give an inconvenient messaging. It was about the messaging, not about the scientific reality. So I'm like, well, who are you, man, to be my better and to tell me that it's not necessary, but I should do it because of fashion, essentially. So the Democrats and the left were very upset at Trump for apparently manipulating the CDC. Now, maybe it's because I'm right-leaning, but I didn't really see the Trump administration manipulating the CDC or manipulating the science. I didn't see it. But it seems to me I'm seeing a lot more of it now and emissions from this. So I was like, why not a couple months ago? And my hatred of basically Fauci and the NIH grows with every passing moment. So please stop lying to us, government. That'd be great. Nate, let's start with you this time. Do you hate the government for lying to us? You have to turn your mic on. Your mic. Anytime.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, I do hate the government lying to us. Well, I don't know. Because, hey, even Trump admitted, right? Remember when he had that? I don't know why he likes to bare his soul to Bob Woodward. But he told Bob Woodward, we know it's dangerous. We know it's going to kill. We know this. And later on, he said, I meant to. I was downplaying it, right? Fauci downplays it. He's a liar. Trump downplays it. He's the man. Everybody's downplaying it because it seems like nobody wanted people to panic. It is what it is. But so if they're going to lie to us, I don't know. I don't know what to expect sometimes, because I do want to know the truth. But there's sometimes I don't think everyone should know the truth. Like, for instance, we all shouldn't know if there's a war and they're about to strike a certain, location. Like, there's certain things the government, I think, should keep secret and should keep from us. But there is a balance there, right? There are top secret clearances and things of that nature. Also about the virus itself too. I'm definitely glad about the mask thing. But I remember at one point it was an issue about whether people who were vaccinated could even transmit the virus. So even though you had all these people who were vaccinated, you had people who are still unvaccinated, so you could transmit to them. Look at the New York Yankees, for instance, right? Then like 8 players who were vaccinated, and they just have an outbreak, and people are like, oh my God, so many people had an outbreak, and all these people were vaccinated. Yeah, 8 players, right? So it seems to still be able to happen. And it was Trump's people who actually put the mask mandate in and said it would save lives, even till the end, they pushed that mandate. So, maybe it might just be the CDC. Maybe you're right. Maybe the CDC, because of the leadership changes, but it was it was Trump CDC who said mask work. They said that to the end. That was the last thing. They were walking out the door, keep wearing masks. And now, Biden's saying that, hey, don't take the mask off. So I don't know. It's interesting. I don't know why the masks were so, I'm probably still going to be even wear my mask, but it is what it is.
I mean, I'm kind of two minds on this, because on the one hand, I mean, you can look at it from a very pessimistic view and say the government is keeping secrets from us, and they've got one standard for people that are working in government, and then one standard for everybody else. You can look at it that way. You can also look at it from the perspective of that they are also trying to manage a very difficult position, in that they are trying to provide certainty in an incredibly uncertain time, right? Like anytime, thinking about just as an example, being a lawyer, right? You want to be able to, when you have a client that walks in the door, you want to be able to give them some sense of certainty, because they have obviously an uncertain position. That's why they came in. They have questions. They have, a certain legal issue. And sometimes, or a lot of times, I guess as lawyers, we're also able to be like, well, this case could go this way, it could go that way. We can be very wishy-washy sometimes. But when it comes to medicine, usually what we're looking for from a doctor is for them to say, it is this. Here is your diagnosis. This is, like X or Y. And so we're looking for that level of certainty, I think, from a profession that, generally speaking, is able to give that kind of stuff, but in a situation that no one has any idea of what's going on, realistically, right? Like no one knew anything, a year ago even. And
yeah, a year ago, I would agree with you. I wasn't suggesting that this was, all bad the entire time, but I was definitely suggesting that they knew more sooner than they were willing to tell.
But and on the other hand, there was the messaging that came out periodically that was a bit more political at the same time too, when they said, when they were I guess it was the CDC or a group of doctors or whatever it was that had been saying this the whole time, like no protesting for, people were protesting mask policies and whatnot in places like Southern California and other places. These mass protests were happening, and they were like, you're not allowed to protest. You're not allowed to protest. These are mass gatherings. But unless it is a Black Lives Matter protest, in which case COVID makes a difference. COVID can tell the difference.
Because racism is also a public health emergency, and so we need protests.
That is when they're politicizing health, and so it's that kind of stuff that really, I think, diminishes their authority and people's willingness to listen to them and to believe that they actually have the masses' interests at heart. And so I think, I'm personally willing to have a certain level of uncertainty, sort of wishy-washiness coming from the CDC on masks and on vaccines, because, there's only so much that they can test as they're going along. And so long as they're trying to sort of course correct, we're starting to, the volatility of the guidance is getting less and less over time, right? Because they have more data behind them. That for me is okay. It's when that's
a charitable interpretation of reality. I will give you it's plausible and charitable. So you want to be charitable? All right, I understand.
But there's, it's those other bits of messaging that obviously get in the way of that charity, because then, you're like, well, you obviously were not as scientific about that other issue. So what about this issue? How do I know that you're actually basing that on science and data as opposed to, political beliefs and emotions? So.
Well, in one instance, though, the news media, I do think the news media exposed themselves with the issue of the Black Lives Matter rally, because that was them pushing that. Oh, look at these people without masks on. And then when the Black Lives Matter rallies did come on, you didn't hear anything about maskless people. Matter of fact, they were commenting them, oh, look how many people got masks on. It's like, really? We're going there now, But I do want to say that I think that's a media issue. I don't really think the government was really involved in pushing, that in a sense. The government would say everybody should wear a mask, right? And nobody should be mask either. That was the Trump CDC was constant with saying that, and even those local governments. But I do think the media, the way the media portrayed it, was wrong and should have been called out. But I think we all know the media is extremely left leaning. So
I also take a bit of exception to the Biden administration really taking any credit for this, because someone will correct me if I'm wrong, but I didn't really see a change in the logistical rollout from the Trump administration. Everything that Biden is doing, what we were already on a path to. It was great because when he said, we're going to have 100 million shots in 100 days, if you just looked at the numbers, you're already there. You're already there. You're basically pledging to do something you're going to hit.
Listen,
we can do math.
It's just like it's the argument that the people made when Obama at the Obama administration, right? Jobless rate was increasing for 30 straight months or whatever, and it just continued to go with Trump. And Trump, he got an economy already going down, and Trump was like, "No, I had to take credit from day one." It happens with every administration.
Yeah,
Trump got the economy, which is Biden's going to get the vaccine.
Oh, and I don't know if this is fair or not, but it pissed me off so much. I think it was Vox. I saw this video from Vox this week about how the mean rich countries are hoarding all the vaccine from the poor countries. And this is Vox's, it pissed me off so much. Vox's thesis is like, well, all the rich countries were able to invest in a whole bunch of vaccines. They didn't know if they were going to work or not, and they were able to expedite them through production, which is true, because the normal way that you do a vaccine basically is you try something, it fails. You try another something, it fails. You try another something, it fails. And what made this different was the rich countries in the world said, what if we try 30 things all at once? What if we ramp them up through production without knowing if any of them are going to work? So we're basically committing now to ramp these up all the way through the process, because we won't know until we're already there whether or not they succeed, and then we won't have to do the production after. We'll have it ready to go.
Yeah.
So all the rich countries are like, okay, let's do that, and they basically bought a whole bunch of vaccine that's crap, and they also bought some vaccine that worked, and they got all the supply because they got all the demand orders. We're the contract we'll take everything that you can produce.
Yeah.
It's like, well, all the poor countries, they couldn't afford to do this. They couldn't afford to make all these bets. And so they have to stand behind all the rich countries who paid for all the research and paid for all the research that didn't work. And they're the ones getting the vaccine, and they're really, really mean. And this is bad. And I'm listening to this video from Vox, and I'm like, I don't understand. I don't get it.
But if you were on the other side of that equation, I don't know. I can see it a little differently. But I do want. But your point is so well taken, though, because you're right. If you're investing the money, if you're taking the bets, if you're making the big gambles, but
there was huge risk. In fact, there was guaranteed risk, because you pretty much know that almost all of them will fail. You're hoping one of them will work.
Yeah.
But you
got four.
They're pretty much all going to fail.
Yeah. Pretty much.
And you're spending billions and billions and billions of dollars. I forget if the numbers changed, but I think when I was in law school, the cost of the average medication to get to success is $1.2 billion. But that was 17 years ago, so it's probably moved up since then.
But are we that cold though? I don't know. I just feel that's just so cold. It's I understand. We paid for it. We should get it first, right? Our asses on the line. That's our money. I do understand it, but there's got to be some other option, and
they have to wait till the amount we bought is delivered to us, because we got priority, because we bought it first. Yeah. Because we're like, we'll produce your crop no matter how crappy it is.
I don't know. Maybe I don't know. There's got to be some other solution. And
Vox pissed me off.
Out of luck. I don't know, Alita. Am I being too bleeding heartish? Maybe my heart is bleeding.
I don't. I mean, I tend to. I think on that particular question, I think I tend to side more on Kurt's side that if you put in the risk, you get the reward first. I mean, that's kind of how it goes with any kind of business, right? I mean, if you haven't put in the time, the effort, the money, why should someone else get priority over you when you've input all of that? That's not to say that we should. I mean, completely leave everyone else behind, which is why I'm glad that we are exporting now at this point from what I saw the other day, I think. But I will say that from a foreign policy standpoint, it's a good idea to be exporting to around the country or around the world, because it helps, with our position in the world. I mean, not to say that we're in a vulnerable position, but when it comes to the other big powers that are exporting, we want to look like we're helping and not like we're falling behind while others are stepping in to our role. So there's that side too.
Well, there are other solutions. Like I know India was asking if they can relax some of the IP on some of the vaccines, so they can start pumping them out. What's it called, generic for a time being, and then they'll put those locks back on, so you couldn't do them generic. But obviously, all the companies were like, hell no. We Johnson & Johnson's like, no. So the U.S. didn't do that. But something like that could have been, because we know there's going to be booster shots and things of that nature. So maybe if you're saying, okay, we spent all this research, something that's causing people, lives or deaths, you can say, okay, well, you can produce your own to get us through this, and then we'll cut it off when we're back to where we're going to go, because you're going to give them the vaccine for free anyway, right? Why not relax the IP?
Yeah.
Well, the classic reason is because the second pill costs 4 cents. The first pill costs $2 billion. You have to recoup all that cost from creating the thing in the first place, and
but you're gonna recoup
lots of
that
medications fail. It's not like everything drug companies do succeed. A lot of what they do fail. They fail all the time. It's a very expensive business.
No, I'm talking about 4 that made it. There's 4 that made it, right? There's 4 that made it. Now I understand. Give them 3, the AstraZeneca.
We didn't approve the other one, right, in the U.S.
Yeah, but that's the one that's going everywhere. That's the one that everyone else is getting AstraZeneca.
Yeah, well, it's like so, we don't want it. We're good. So yeah, they can have the AstraZeneca.
Yeah, everybody's giving up AstraZeneca.
They're using it in Europe, aren't they?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. They had stopped it for a while. Then they're using it again.
Yeah, I think so. And but I mean, that also, of course, Nate, is assuming that they can put the lid back on it after it's been opened up, right? I mean, because that's also an issue, is that once IP is out there, then you still have to control who you give it to in terms of replication, because once it's out there, other people can just copy it, and you can it can be harder to sort of clamp down on that if there's other later unauthorized uses.
Well, but I'm assuming if you have the controls, though, like I'm giving it to the biggest Indian company. It's only they know our secrets, and then they can pump it out for their people. I'm assuming if it's a leak from, I don't know. I'm less concerned about that, but I am. But somebody in the chat just said that they actually did it. They relaxed the IPs.
Yeah, and I'm also not sure on a purely practical level and sort of the distribution, because it has to be at least does the J&J vaccine have to be frozen? No, it can be. So that one can. Does the AstraZeneca does that have to be frozen? Do you know?
I think it does. I think.
At least with the J&J, it doesn't have to be frozen, because otherwise you might have distribution problems. And
the J&J is a one-hitter quitter too.
Yeah, so you got that all going for you,
Yeah.
So yeah, good stuff. So yeah, those are all the controversial. Well, not all the controversial issues I had. I had some other stuff we could talk about. We could talk about Liz Cheney getting booted out of the House third position if we want to, but or not. Depends what your guys' excitement level is.
I mean, I don't know. It's interesting right now to see the GOP kind of get split down the middle on what's what the future is going to hold for the party. But I don't know. I don't know on that issue. I'm just kind of waiting and watching to see what happens next, personally.
Okay.
I don't know. The GOP, man. The GOP.
Yeah, I don't know
But
what
Trump
it means.
is still in control. Trump is still in control.
Yeah, it kind of seems that way, but I'm not sure if it's Trump as such or if it's just his attitude has been more prevalent. But either way, it's interesting seeing that the Republicans are, fighting this 9/11 style commission for the January 6th riots. And I'm not 100% sure what their motivation is. I think partly it's because they think it's being covered by so many other things it's not necessary. But then again, the Republicans did look into Benghazi more than once. How many times did they look into Benghazi? It was a couple times.
Yeah. Was there like a permanent select committee on Benghazi?
Yeah, pretty much. So, yeah, it's like, well, if we can look into Benghazi, I think it was 40-something plus times, then I'm not sure having this U.S. Congress duplicate the work and look at it is necessarily a bad thing, especially to put it all in the same place. The only reason I would oppose it would be if I felt like the result was going to be overly political and not neutral. So I want it to be, just a recitation of reality and not, necessarily bashing on anybody in particular. So that'd be the only reason I'd really oppose it.
Did you guys hear about the attorney that's representing the shaman? What's his name? The QAnon shaman.
Yeah, QAnon shaman. What did attorney for QAnon shaman do recently?
So he made a statement basically saying, it's a very interesting argument, but basically saying the QAnon shaman has Asperger's and all of the people are, his words, on the short bus. All of the people that were involved on January 6th, they all are complete idiots. None of them essentially knew what they were doing, basically was his argument. But he used very, very colorful language to describe them. And it's like, I mean, it sounds like he's just completely ripping into his own client, which is like,
my
crazy,
client is
but
my
that's
client
an
is
interesting
an idiot.
strategy.
That's a strategy. All right, okay.
This is a sanity defense. That's what he's trying for here.
Basically,
but
or
with
lack of
something
competency, take your pick.
Yeah.
But with something like Asperger's, like I have a very good friend that is a behavioral therapist for kids with autism, and I know my friend would say that's not the same thing, not at all, and I'm sure there are plenty of other people, in that community that would be very, very upset about that kind of a
I mean, those fashion
distinction.
stylings alone tell me this is a guy who knows how to put together an outfit. And
but then you also, just sort of for comparison, people with Asperger's. On the other hand, Elon Musk apparently has Asperger's. He revealed that when he hosted SNL.
Oh yeah, you had to see that
one
coming though. Biggest surprise ever, right?
Yeah. But it's like, I mean, I'm not an expert on it, but from what I understand, people, obviously Elon Musk is a very successful person, so it doesn't mean that
Richest
somebody has
person in the
Asperger's.
world.
Yeah, it very, very rich, very powerful, a very like a strong ability to control a lot. So this argument that because this guy has Asperger's, that he's, he was a complete idiot and didn't know what he was doing. I mean, being an idiot is not a defense under the law. No. If it was, there would be a lot of people that would get away with a lot. But I think using something like an Asperger's diagnosis is also a little bit touchy. So. Yeah,
if he's even able to use the defense, I can see it being barred as not legally cognizable before it even gets that far.
Right.
You gotta have a couple experts come on and attest.
Like the judge will not let you argue it because it's not a legally valid defense. So yeah.
So, anywho, that was interesting.
Yeah. Well, I guess I will end the stream for now. This has been a fun and different stream. I liked talking about some different stuff. I had fun.
Yeah.
We solved the Israeli-Palestine problem. We successfully determined the CDC's credibility, and we've projected what the Supreme Court is going to do on abortion in the future, and all the problems have been solved. How fun. I'll remind you to please check out my guest, Legal Bites, to my right. Alita here, she is producing some wonderful content here. She's growing. She's going to surpass me any day now, and I'm going to be like, how that happened and why it's going to happen. And to my bottom
we all
is
grow
Nate. Yeah, that's right. Rising tide rises all boat. And to my bottom is Nate the lawyer. Alita, what date were we talking about for New York?
So
19th.
The 20th.
Is that Sunday?
21st. Yeah, that's the Sunday.
Okay. So we are tentatively, very tentatively, but we're very tentatively looking to have a meetup on Sunday, June the 20th in New York City with whoever wants to be there. So it'll be me, Nate the Lawyer, Alita, and whoever else we can drag to this thing.
Yeah.
And we will meet at a bar, and we will call it LawCon, and we will, have a meetup and stuff. So, pencil it in on your calendar for June the 20th. So that's a Sunday. So yeah. In the meantime, please check out my guest channel. I've been on Civil Law. I hope all is well. Till later, my friends. Peace.
All right. Bye.
And goodbye.